Today on Frontlines, we show you why brokers hate truckers that negotiate. That's right, when you're smarter than them, they figure it out and they run the other way. A recent article in Landline boasts proactive measures the FMCSA is taking to fight broker fraud. Today, we take a more proactive look at ways you can make it easier than ever. So come on in, join the panel, leave your comments, call our studio line, and let's fight broker fraud together.
Shall we begin?
To give back to the trucking community with the most unique show on YouTube. That's right, Truckin Frontlines. I'm your host, Boss Man, 13 years in trucking, and still passionate about learning solutions and inspiring others to do the same. That's what we do here. Through the Truth in Broadcasting Network, we bring you news and views that you can only get here twice a week. So far scheduled Wednesday and Saturday. We put up the news. We give you the platform to have sound. Bear with me, I'm in pain. To sound off about the views and the solutions that matter. Yes, I'm fighting tremendous back pain right now. It was almost as close not to have the show because of it, but I'm fighting it. Why? Because you matter. I'm fighting it because the trucking industry needs more people like us. This show needs to continue, and I will get it done. Anyway, you guys keep tuning in week after week. We make it a habit to bring you what needs to happen to make trucking great again. You sound off on the solutions and the problems in an industry that needs your help to succeed. You can sound off in the comments like you always do. The chat box there to the right. I failed to put the StreamYard link in the chat, but fear not, my friends. Scroll down in the description and you will see to join the show. The StreamYard link is right there in the description underneath the show. Doesn't matter whose channel you're watching it on. If it's Driving with John, Grumpy Old Trucker, Midlife Trucker. If you're watching us on those shows, just go down there, hit that StreamYard link. You can become a panelist on the show. You can also call the studio line at 860-785-3547. The number will be shown throughout the show. You can also send me emails on your thoughts about the show or upcoming news features you'd like to know about. Send it to That's Truckin' News at Outlook.com. That's Truckin' News at Outlook.com. I don't undertake this effort alone. I, with a distinguished panel of like-minded souls, bring you a variety of opinions, quips, wisecracks, and the occasional luck of landing on common sense ways of making you relate to issues we talk about here. Because that's not all. We count on you as well. So leave your thoughts, your questions. Expect to be heard on trucking's newest forum for social discourse right here on Truckin' City Media. Thank you guys for joining us today. We certainly look forward to having a great show. As I said earlier, I'm not alone. I have brought with me the grumpiest old codger this side of, well, on your side, I should say, of the Mississippi. So tell me, what acorns and what the hell are you doing with acorns anyway? Where did that even get started?
Got started when I was a young lad with my mother and her friend on a creek bank years ago.
I think it's neat that you call them acorns out there. I mean, on the East Coast, we call them acorns. I don't know. As long as I've known you, I can't get over the difference in how the word is pronounced and what it means. Just, I don't know. It's very funny.
It is.
Yeah.
Just like my whatnot shelf.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the start of all this, backstage, we were talking for a minute or so, and you seem to feel like there's not a whole lot you can offer to today's topic. I beg to differ. I mean, today's topic is important. It's important to not only the company drivers, but it's also important to owner operators and individual truckers. It really is. Because broker fraud is something that we're all facing. And I don't care if you're a company driver or an owner operator, you deal with it one way or the other. Can you think of one way, Frank, that you as a company driver would be impacted by broker fraud?
Well, I probably would say basically like the double brokerage type stuff where, one sells it to the other one and expects you to get it delivered. And then you don't have the right information and you're basically looking at getting to the shippers and receivers and they're like, this is not supposed to be here at this time, come back at this other day and things like that would be kind of an effect towards me personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the idea that you're not getting the right information by itself affects everyone down the line. I
Hmm.
mean, because I have two schools of thought. Now, if you have a legitimate broker, somebody that's A, financially responsible, B, legitimately in business, and C, as passionate as the two of us are about the industry you serve, you have a tendency then of checking, double checking, and triple checking, making today's show a lot more less relevant and the whole issue over whether or not someone like an agency such as the DOT, FMCSA, FBI, and other authorities have to get involved in what you do on a daily basis, thereby making it easier for us to count on when we get information. It's accurate, it's timely,
Hmm.
and there is no confusion. Now, all that being said, um, I've worked for 13 years, as I said in the industry intro, and I have probably scored, I want to say roughly 10, maybe 12 different scenarios, both as company driver and as owner operator, where I mean, it's just obvious and slapping me in the face. Okay, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Now, it's either one of two things: either they're that dumb and they really have no clue, and because of that, they're using that stupidity in some cases to gain bank on me, which I don't like, and don't think that that's not a problem. Some people are just legitimate, but they play stupid because, well, it makes me more money. Um, so that's a game. But then there's number two. They actually have no clue in serving the industry. All they're looking for is bank, and they don't care whether you even get paid.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I'm highlighting today because that happens a lot. And in today's story, I want to highlight a couple of initiatives that I think are not really first in everyone's mind, but are kind of happening behind the scenes. And Landline Media actually took time to write a story and highlight a couple of things the FMCSA is doing. I don't really feel all that great about it, just simply because it's the FMCSA. When the hell have they ever worked anything fast? Um, but you know what? Kudos to them. They're doing something. And on the heels of last week's show, where I talk about new leadership, where I talked about, the other issues that came up in last week's show, I thought this would be a great topic. Not only covering the story, but I also want to bounce near the end of the show with practical tips and information you, the viewer, can use to take with you to make sure that A, you can gauge if somebody's really screwing with you, and B, to kind of watch your bottom line. It's a collection of things that I've learned over the last 13 years. And not only that, just things I've been told talking with others in the industry. So some of it's mine, some of it's theirs. There's a collection of tips I think will serve you well. So be sure and stick around near the end of this broadcast, because I think that last 15, 20 minutes is really going to be game changer for you. And I hope you guys stick around. So let's check the comments out here for a few minutes and see if anybody's adding to the show. Of course, my wife watching us. Thank you, my dear. God bless, and hope everybody's having a great day. Jerome Jones, good afternoon. Glad you could join us, Jerome. Sorry about the weird time, folks, but you know what? It's 115 degrees out here in freaking Phoenix, and I was not going to sit here in a sweat box. So I had to move the truck around, get everything situated, and yeah, I'm coming to you comfortably with shoulder pain, but comfortably. A new face in town, Travion. I'm just going to call you Travion because I'm not even going to butcher the rest of that name. That the best you can do on that rate. I say rate is non-negotiable, just like the listing says. Au contraire, my friend. Au contraire. Some brokers do have a margin. In fact, I'll go a step further. All brokers have a margin. You know, I got no problem with brokers making money. They're in it for bank too, just like me. Okay? But I remember making a video not long ago, and I think it was on my other channel called That's Truckin'. If you check out that thing about brokers and negotiating, it's a recent video I put up. A fellow trucker was complaining about a $400 trip. The most he had to put into it was 82 miles. That represents an hour and a half's worth of driving. And he was doing nothing but crap on that broker. He was talking, I mean, I only played about 20 seconds of his complaining, but he was dog crap on that broker, calling him out, telling him what his name was and all that. He didn't do the math to realize it was $4.87 a mile. In today's market, if you can get $4.87 a mile, grab that load, dude. That's doing something. Now, grant you, it may have been military, it may have been time in there, whatever. You have to gauge it when you get, but if you ask the right questions, that $4.87 a mile can be damn attractive. And I have another guest with me who probably knows a great deal. Fate Truckin' is with us this morning. If you're able to, my friend, certainly join us. I know you have some valuable input on brokers, broker fraud, and how to negotiate good rates. We'd love to hear from you if you're able to do so. If not, enjoy the show, my friend, either way. 7C says, afternoon, grilling burgers. God bless you, my friend. I wish I were in the Carolinas. I'd certainly do that.
I don't think you'd have to worry about that. Just stick the burger out there on your hood, and it'll be done in no time there, boss man.
Well, Fate, I'm about to solve that problem right now, my friend. I will provide you as well as everyone else the link. I was in a rush this morning and
It's
unable
actually
to. He's specific, and I will certainly cater to all guests.
yeah. I was gonna say I
Whatever show
attached
you're
it to my
watching.
description.
Yep, whatever show you're watching, man, it's in the chat. Just go ahead and hit it. You can come on in. I cater to all guests, so you know I didn't have time to put it in the chat, which is what he was looking for. So I try to make it as easy as possible. Anyway, while he's doing that, and while hopefully my other guests decide to show up, let me talk a little bit about today's feature story, okay? Just to get on to business and to make it make sense today. Go this way, so just hang tight there, Grumpy. We'll be right with you. Previously, we talked about fraud from the viewpoint of the carriers and shippers. That's last week's show. How many of you believe that by asking the right questions, you could have in the past thwarted what could have potentially been a nightmare load? Think about it. What was it you did to make you feel like after the fact, phew, that was close? Put that in the comments, because today that's what we're going to talk about. I'm talking about a story dealing with some upcoming news, the FMCSA and their efforts to clean house. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, this new effort to clean up broker fraud is brought to you by the ever diligent folks at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. For years, our industry has been screaming into the void about shady brokers, only to be met with crickets. Crickets. But no, lo and behold, FMCSA has finally decided to sharpen their focus on broker fraud. Yes, you heard it right here, folks. That bastion of swift action and transparency. They're taking a stand. In a story featured in Landline magazine, link is in the description, by the way, their latest series of thrilling initiatives to combat broker fraud, enter Initiative 1, the registration fraud team. These champions of justice will take on this Herculean task of keeping fraudsters from registering in the first place. With the latest tech wizardry like multi-factor authentication, selfie submission, who'd have thought that? It's clear that the FMCSA is pulling out those stops, or at least so it would seem. Just imagine all this to prevent a few bad actors. Wonder how long that'll take. But wait, there's more. FMCSA's heroic crusade also includes Operation Protect Your Load. A name so catchy it almost makes you forget about the endless bureaucracy you got to go through. And let's not overlook their final rule on broker and financial responsibility. Now, let's not kid ourselves. The FMCSA is not limited in their powers, often having to pass the buck to local law enforcement like FBI. Rest assured, guys, your complaints are crucial. The more you file, the more you complain, the more they're going to spring into action. It might take millions of us. It might get done someday, but it'll get done. So that's just but a sample of the things that Landline says that they think will help combat broker fraud. So let me ask you in the audience, how big of an issue do you think this is? And or do you think that what I just read to you and what we're talking about today is nothing but a bunch of hot air? Boom! Welcome to Man of the Hour, Fate Truckin. He himself barters and swaps loads daily, and I'll bet has a wealth of information to add to this. What say you, my friend?
So I was going to make a comment on that comment you read about don't negotiate, only take what might be posted or offered. Business doesn't operate that way. Nobody is sitting just I believe negotiation is a great tactic that we get to use as owner operators, and within reason. Like I have seen people try to negotiate a rate on a load that is just astronomical. I believe that's where understanding the market, understanding your lane, understanding your operating costs all come into play. But
Right.
negotiation is such a great tactic for what we do that it almost becomes an art form. I mean, it really does. And it's
Yeah.
important. It's a very important skill for you to learn and work on and eventually hopefully master in the what works for you.
Right. How do you think that negotiation, being we're on that topic, how do you think that would impact someone like a company driver? I mean, a lot of people think, nah, it's not a big deal. But I tend to think it is because I mean, even having a dispatcher setting up your loads, even the company I currently work for, I mean, I have someone setting up loads. And quite honestly, I do have choice. But if that network of dispatchers has behind them fraudulent people providing incorrect information, it can impact. What do you think?
Well, not only that, I think even if you're taking a company position somewhere, you should negotiate your pay, negotiate your time off, negotiate like,
Yeah.
Negotiate the hell out of your deal because it's your
Right.
deal. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Just because a company now, just because a company offers you, X amount per hour, X amount per load, X amount per mile, X amount in percentage, doesn't mean you have to take it. You can
No.
negotiate it to whatever you want. Working with fraudulent things in trucking is difficult to avoid.
Mhm.
That's why I'm of the belief of working with, whether it's shippers customers, working with them independently, basically eliminating the broker. If you have these huge problems with brokers, there's an easy way to work around it. Don't work with them. Go out and get your own freight.
Right. Yeah.
Is it easy?
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
Absolutely not easy. But you
I-
can do it.
Yeah, I can tell you firsthand. I mean, I had 8 years with Landstar. I owned my own truck. I ran off the load board. I ran mostly spot market, but I had to when the rates turned south just before I sold my truck. I had to rely on contract freight because, and Landstar offers both sides. They do contract and they do spot. It just depends on the brokers you deal with and the names you're familiar with. But I will tell you, and the reason I mention this is because of the list of brokers that I thought were suspect or reported to Landstar or refused to work with grew quite large over a great period of time. I had an actual notebook, which I had agency codes. I mean, fill that page. People I would not deal with because they either A, did not have the right information, made you wait on information when you're at the gate checking in, or just withheld way too much, for their own purposes. And I got to where I just had to keep that list and stay away from them.
Well,
Go
not only that,
ahead.
you had made a topic earlier, or you had mentioned something earlier about, you don't mind brokers making money and things like that. Here's how I operate. I don't worry about what somebody else is making. I don't care what somebody else is making. I care about what I'm making and if it's profitable for me. If it's not
Exactly.
profitable for me, I don't do it. I don't
Yeah.
complain that the broker's making too much or keeping too much. I just don't
Right.
do it.
Right. Well, it's just like 7C says, per mile doesn't always matter. That example I cited earlier, he says 487 a mile sucks if it takes you all day. Yes, I agree. It does. But you have to be able to, and of course, follow us to the end of the show because I'm going to make some of my recommendations I've collected, and hopefully, our two guests on the screen can add to it. But you know, again, you don't want to take all day. So knowing certain questions to ask and certain red flags to look for will help you determine that in the long run. Because obviously, you don't want to run into a case where it looks good on paper, but in reality, you're losing. And I don't.
Well,
To back up his point, I've seen $10 a mile loads to go that weren't worth it. Thank you for that, 7Cs. Make a good point.
a lot of that is knowing the lane you're running too.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
instance, Minnesota to Hinckley, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly who the receiver is. There's
Yeah.
one receiver in Hinckley, Ohio that takes refrigerated freight. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an Aldi distribution center. It's the only place out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like knowing your lane when you're booking a load. And here's the thing. Part of your negotiation is kind of let the broker know you know everything about this load. You know the shipper, you know the receiver, you know the highways that you have to take to get there. And
Yeah.
that all helps with your negotiation. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
not
It got to,
I'm
not to cut you off, Scott, but it got to a point where I was dealing with a shipper out of Clyde, Ohio. Now, if you know anything about Central Ohio, you know that there's only two possibilities for distributors in Clyde, Ohio. One is the biggest one there, and that's Whirlpool. And I think there's another one down there I haven't dealt with, but there's another one down the way. It's another name, not appliance related. But every time I saw on the load board Clyde, Ohio, I knew instantly where it was picking up from. And I knew that their numbers back then, their pickup numbers, started with 526. So I'd constantly get rate cons from unknowns that had all kinds of different numbers. And I finally got hooked up with a lady that worked out of that distributorship. She knew her stuff. And I never had to ask her twice for the information. It was always right there. I knew the format, I knew the circumstances, I knew the setup, everything was familiar, and the rate per mile was beautiful. So, just to your point. And I seldom ever, and you guys may or may not agree with what I'm about to do, but I seldom ever talk up another channel. But if you guys want to know about lanes and where to look for how the market is, look up Trucking Made Successful. Miranda is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to trucking lanes, the market, the good, the bad. I've been watching her a lot lately, and she's got a great show. So if you want to know more about this kind of stuff, tune her up. She's good people. She is. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her or not, but I felt I had to mention that.
Mm.
I can read freight waves and do a live show too, so that's my opinion on her.
There you go. Well, I mean, regardless whether she uses it or not, I mean, she does know her stuff without that. So, I mean, she's proven that time and again. So,
Really?
but you got to watch your shows, Scott. But today's
I
show is
have.
about them. Yeah.
We'll talk
We're
off
moving on.
screen.
We're moving on. Okay. Nonetheless, look, this new registration fraud team and their initiative to combat fraud. What do you guys think of that? Do you think it's everything it's purported to be, or do you think it's just the FMCSA blowing hot air? What do you think? I mean, do you need to know a little bit more about it? Because I got a few tips on what they're supposed to be doing. If you'd like. Actually,
Are we talking about having to go through like the recertification for brokers and things like that? Is that what you're talking
That's
about?
part of it. What they're doing is they're clamping down on the initial activation, and they're actually making certain recertifications a little bit more engaging and a little bit more difficult. I mentioned in there they're adding in 2FA, which is that two-factor authentication, which now all brokers are required to do, I think, where they didn't used to. And they're also trying to scan my notes because I actually made.
Well, you look at your notes, and I'll just say
Yeah.
this. I think anything. I don't put a lot of faith behind the government agency holding up their end of any type of law,
Right.
unless it benefits them.
Right.
But I'm all for fraudulent brokers, fraudulent carriers
Right.
being removed from the industry. 100%.
Right.
I can't compete with a fraudulent company.
Yeah.
They win every time.
Nobody can. Yeah. A couple of keynotes that came out of my research was compliance reviews. They're beginning compliance reviews a little bit more often. They help identify brokers who are not meeting legal requirements. They're increasing the amount of investigations. With support from Infrastructure Investment Act, they're actually putting more money into commercial enforcement and safety investigations behind keeping brokers legitimate. Enhanced transparency. You've heard in the past, I'm talking about broker transparency. It's still being fought in the courts. Part of the initiative locally with this particular registration fraud team is they're making brokers now submit selfies as a way to identify a face to a broker or associated owner, something they did not do in the past.
I've
More
had to do that.
collaboration with law. Yeah, more collaboration with law enforcement, better access to resources. Those are just but some of the things mentioned in that broadcast about that. So that's what I know about that whole thing. So
Well, I
All
mean,
sounds good.
are they going to be trying to do something similar like how like Google does a review and you're able to go to that and say, okay, this is somebody I would work with, this is somebody I wouldn't. I mean, is that basically kind of what they're doing? Is that the whole deal?
no, I think a lot of it is going to be controlled by the FMCSA, audited by them. But once
Mhm.
you enter it in, you're stuck. You can't edit. You can't do like Yelp and just go in and just enter whatever you feel like. You know, it's going to be a controlled database, I think. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but if you're going to be putting in there, you know, your broker registration number, a selfie, all your financial documents, which you'll be required to submit, why give open source access? I mean, that would be stupid. They're
Right.
probably going to tightly control that, I would think.
Well, I think it ought to be added to where people as like drivers and stuff like Fate over there that does a lot of brokerage type loads and things, that where you can put an actual review with that so that other drivers can look at that and say, no, I'm staying away from that. This has got so many bad reviews, and then after they get so many, then the feds step in and say, sayonara.
Well, it's kind of what already does happen, but not by this system. This system only, I think, what they're talking about is a way of enhancing what's already there, but I don't think it'll have a whole lot to do with those already in the system, because what they're hoping to do is weed out those that are in the system that are doing everything we're talking about, which is, not working for the industry's best interest. If all you're doing is in and out for a quick buck, you open a broker tomorrow, but then a month after that you shut down because you want to hide the fact that you've made money. That's what they're trying to stop, and there's been a lot of that. People come and go, and they don't pay their bills. So that's what impacts us. That's what impacts everybody as a whole.
Of course it does.
Yeah, it does. It makes us look bad, and it makes everything we do really. Think about it from this perspective. Have you ever had to cancel or delay a trip because a broker didn't give you everything you need? Whether that was funding for lumpers, correct information on pickup, all of the terms and conditions that exist. Maybe there was a day's waiting load. Maybe you had to drop trailer and wait a full 24 hours. I've run into that a number of times, and that would be so much easier to happen with someone that's legitimately not concerned about the industry. That would be something that I think would be right up the alley of people like the FMCSA. These brokers don't care. They're not collecting it. They're not looking at it. They're not talking. And of course, as my tips later will suggest, we're not asking the right questions. But how many times has that happened to you? I mean,
For me,
you've had,
over the last 4 years,
yeah.
honestly, it hasn't been that often. But I'll
So pretty much
I'll say
everybody
this.
you work with is above board, then, huh? You're lucky.
Well, yeah, that was my next statement. I haul a lot of customer freight. I work with a very select few brokers. Now, that doesn't mean there are times I'm picking loads off the spot market, but it's usually with brokerages that I've dealt with before and already have like a working relationship with. I can't think of like I can't think of I know that I've been held up because of like pickup numbers, and I have shown up to receivers that haven't had appointments scheduled where I might have to wait a day or two. Do I think it's fair, the compensation I receive for that? Not necessarily, but I've always been paid. Like I said, do I think it's 100% worth my time sitting there using my trailer as a storage trailer? No, but I've always been paid. The only thing I might not have been paid on over 4 years is some hours of detention, but that's going to happen to all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've even had that happen. I mean, I've had it on both ends. I've had it where I've gotten every dime I needed for detention, and I've gotten none. So, I mean, it's questionable as to whether that could be contributed to broker fraud, but you'll legitimately get paid detention. Whereas if somebody's in it just for themselves, you won't get a dime. So, I mean, to that degree, yeah. But
yeah, a lot of that detention stuff has to do with the shipper and receiver themselves not wanting to pay it.
Well, and there to the point too. If you have a
that's what they say.
Broker,
I don't.
Well, I agree with both of you. And here's my point. If you have a legitimate broker that really cares about A, the customer they serve, and B, us here doing the job that they represent, then all that goes smoothly. If you mark down that you have detention, you know beforehand what the policies and procedures are for that. You get paid, customers happy, broker gets paid. Everybody's happy in that city. But on the other case, if they're just in for the money and they're just, here today, gone tomorrow, you'll never get a dime. It doesn't really matter.
Oh,
And usually
one
the
of the
shippers want bad taste in their mouth.
one of the things is touching on that detention thing is the company I work for currently. What I do is I write my in time when I arrive, and then I write my out time, and then I have them initial or sign right there and circle that. So when I turn that paperwork in, my company has a copy. They submit that over to the broker or to the customer, and that way I can eventually get paid as well as them
Right.
because it's
Makes sense.
signed and sealed and delivered basically.
Yep. Makes sense. So, let me see. This may not apply with you, but I'll just ask in general. How do you think fraudulent brokers and or these questionable fly-by-night guys affect your relationship with customers? I mean, the question I had worded was with clients, but they might as well be the same thing. I mean, because if, for example, in your case, Scott, if, for example, you went out on the spot market and spotted something to get back to Minnesota, hypothetically, that was a good load on paper and seemed good on the board, but then all of a sudden you get there and find out a nightmare scenario. I mean, are you going to sit and think, well, that's the broker's fault, or are you going to blame the person you're picking the load up for, i.e., the shipper, to go to his last statement? How do you think how do you think, I mean, industry wide, how do you think that's going to affect the way people look to ship products? Think about that. What are your thoughts? That makes a huge difference, I think.
I think it's important. The scenario you just laid out about getting back to Minnesota and stuff like that. I've ran 2 spot market loads this week. That worked out great for me. They're from brokers that I run a lot of freight for. Actually, I ran 2 loads.
Okay.
When I got home. Anyways, long story short, a broker doesn't control the loading and unloading at facilities.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Do I wish? Listen, when you call to book a load, it's your responsibility to ask all the questions.
Thank you.
I think the broker is going to give you the bare minimum that they want to give you. It's your responsibility to ask more questions. Do I think that's necessarily fair? No.
No.
But that's where it's okay to ask. Say, hey, if you're showing interest in booking a load, ask them who the shipper is. Ask them who the receiver is. And that goes back to what I said earlier about knowing your lane, knowing where you're going makes a huge difference. There's a difference between delivering to a Kroger's and a Walmart. There's a difference between picking up at a DHL facility and an Americold. You know what I mean? I'm not saying any of them are better or worse than either one. I'm just saying there's a big difference between that. And understanding you're probably going to wait longer at a Kroger's than you are a Walmart, or you're going to wait hours to get loaded at a DHL facility versus the 2 hours at an Americold. Those things.
The more familiar you are with the customer, the more that'll answer your question. I mean, I knew instantly when I was going to Whirlpool loads, I was in and out. I mean, it was drop and hook, start and stop, no wait, no detention. Very seldom that ever changed. But to your point, if you got a broker like, Kroger, CS Grocers, I was always, you know who I'm talking about. Every single time, there's always lumper and there's always detention because they never got my loads emptied out in faster than 2 hours. I always got detention. More of that.
See, that
I
all
always
plays
got paid. I always got paid though.
That all plays a role in this. I mean, I don't know, man. You can put blame on truckers. You can put blame on brokers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, be responsible for what you do. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to put take the blame off of people or whatever, but be responsible for yourself. Don't even get me started.
Everybody can benefit by today's show. So I'm about to start on a few recommendations that will help. But you hit on a key point, Scott. Knowing a broker is legit, that's only part of the battle. Because all the time people sit on the fence and bitch and complain and carry on about how this one screwed them and how that one. How much of it is self-defeating, though? How much of it can you prevent? If you know the lane you're in, if you know the customer you're picking up from, you already know what the potential is. You just have to know enough to ask the right questions to combat that before it happens. So you make a very valuable point, Scott, and I appreciate that. And every day, I think a lot can be said for the amount of videos I see on YouTube where people complain about brokers. It's not always them. Some of it can be you. You know, I say a lot on my World of Trucking vlogs. It starts with you. And I mean that, honestly. Guy named the Animal joining us says, I don't think more government involvement will solve anything.
I would agree with him.
Yes, I would agree.
I do too.
I would agree. Hence the sarcasm in my introduction to the story. I don't know if you picked up on it, but yeah. Good point, though, my friend.
I think George Bush said it best. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you ain't gonna fool me again.
Yep. Or
however he said it, however he blundered it up. The point was, you ain't gonna fool me again.
Exactly. Or how about another famous presidential quote? You know, Reagan sitting on the Johnny Carson show, looks over Johnny Carson and says, anytime you hear the words, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. He said, run. That's what he said.
Very good point.
Yeah, he does too. So steps to verify broker legitimacy. Now, I can't speak to this because I don't own my truck and I don't deal with brokers anymore. But there's 3 steps that I researched that are recommended. One is check their registration and their licensing. There is a way of doing it. You can verify them with the FMCSA, and if you're sure that they have a valid MC number, then you're good. Broker responsibility. You can review it and look. They have a credit score. They have a credit rating. There's an easy way to check it. Make sure they're legit and their credit rating is good. And review their ratings on their load boards that they're on. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but there is a rating system that most load boards carry with it. And if there's problems, there's usually indicators, either a lower score, a different number of reviews. Some have more if they're bad, some have less if they're, just depends. But those are a few things if you're looking to actually check, is that a legit broker? That's something a lot of shows like this will not offer. I'm trying to be proactive.
That's what I was talking about, like the Google review type system, you know, how Google allows you to give a review. That's what I was kind of hitting on.
Well, yeah, and in that respect, there are things like that already do exist. So you just got to know where to look. And they're all different with each one of these load boards. I mean, if you go on load board 1, 2, 3, you'll find it one way. But if you go to TQL's load board, again, I'm not, on that load board game anymore. TQL may not even exist. And as far as I know, they suck. But, get my point. Yeah. They're all over the map. There's different ways on each load board to figure out who's legit, who's not. So you just got to be familiar with the app you're using and go from there.
Well, see, Fate and I have been in this game long enough to remember whenever you'd go to a truck stop and actually look up at a screen and watch for a load board and find your loads that way.
Yeah. What are you laughing at, Scott? You got this funny grin on your face when I finished my last statement.
I wish a million people were watching this and heard you say TQL sucks, so they never use it again, and I keep making a lot of money with TQL. That's what I hope happens.
I have heard more people bitch about their actual process. Either it's because of the people that they talk to or their customer service skills. I can't speak to that because I've never dealt with them, but I've seen a number of people I follow. They do not like them. So I personally can't say one way or the other. I've never dealt with TQL. So I claim full hands off on that, but that's just, what I observe. Just join when Driving John channel the issues of brokers. I think there needs to be a maximum amount they can take off the top of loads implemented. Comes from Brian Thomas. Well, I was always under the impression.
Brian, is there?
I don't know. You were going to add to that, Fate? I'm sorry, I didn't
Well,
cut you off.
I was gonna ask him, as a business owner, should they limit the amount that you can profit off of a load? Then, I mean, you're saying the broker can only take so much and make a profit. That means in return, there can be a law that says you can only make so much money. Listen, don't take something if it doesn't work for you. Like, bottom line, you're a business owner. Don't take something if it doesn't work for you. If you get in this idea of broker transparency and a broker having to show you what their profit margin is on that load. Listen, I show once a year my profit. That is to my accountant, that then shares it with the IRS. I don't want to have to share that at all with anybody else. And if this broker transparency stuff goes through, it's only a matter of time before they go back to Congress or whoever and get something passed that we have to show them what our profit is on the load. That's ridiculous. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
So then I can assume that it sounds as if you're of the mindset, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No, listen, owner operators are business owners. We are like that. That's what it is. I don't care if you're leased onto a carrier or if you have your own carrier. You're a business. You are a small business. Operate that way. I can't think of any other businesses that would require the person that is doing the work to find that load for you to say, oh, how much are you making on that? Because they don't know how much you're making on it. Somebody like me that operates super fuel efficient equipment makes more than somebody that might, have a different style truck and different style trailer. My profit margin is going to be higher than theirs. You know what I mean? That is not my fault. That is like business. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
it does actually.
Every business you run, you've got to know what your potential income is, and you've got to know how steady it is, but you've also got to be able to relative that to what your expenses are. You do as much income as possible and spend as little as possible. That's the bottom line. And knowing who you're dealing with goes a long way to saying that will work. So
I've said this a couple of times, and I'd like to, maybe people in the comments can leave a comment on this, because I've gotten mixed reviews on this, right? It's important to know your operating costs. Very important. I think it's as important to know like lane costs, how much it costs you to operate the lanes you are running. You have toll roads, you have toll bridges. If like you're going out to the East Coast, Delaware, New Jersey, things like that, there's costs in that. Knowing those lanes and how much it costs you, not only in your fuel, your taxes, things like that. If you drive into Connecticut, you have a highway use tax. Knowing those things, knowing how much it costs you to operate the lane gives you a starting point on what you are going to negotiate on that lane. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? And those are tools. And you tell the broker, hey, it's going to cost me $50 to cross this bridge, or I need X amount of dollars to help cover that. You know what I mean?
From
if
the
they
background,
say no, you don't have to.
From the background, Midlife Comes to Life says, we don't make the butcher show us how much they paid for the steer when we buy the steak. Good point. Good point.
I disagree with him 100%.
That's funny. One week they agree with each other, the next week they don't. Go figure.
That's the thing. I've agreed with them too much.
You had to know that was coming. I mean, because those two have been kind of creeping me out here lately.
I know, me too.
Yeah. All right, let me see. Let's get on to what everybody tuned in for, which is basically some good recommendations. You know what? Using load boards doesn't have to be all that intimidating. All right. It doesn't have to be a big deal. If you're an owner operator and you are forced to look out on the public load boards, all right, just use the reputable ones, the ones that have the strongest verification processes, the ones that have the most publicity, at least, and at least the ones that actually take the time to vet everybody involved, yourself included. A lot of people complain because it's like an act of Congress to actually be able to get access to load boards. You've got to wait certain time periods, whatever. Sometimes it's worth it because you know what? The harder it is to get in, the less likely it is that the fraudulent brokers, anyway, are going to be proliferating those load boards. So avoid dealing with the brokers on these lesser known ones. But more to Scott's point, the more you know where you're at and where you want to go, and the more you're familiar with people, the better off you'll be. Every time you deal with brokers, document everything. Keep detailed records of all the communications you have, of all the problems you have, any issues that arise, contracts, emails, anything. Man, it's always good to have because you know what? Someday you may need that. It may not benefit you
Listen.
personally, but it, yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was gonna say, like, if you're working 100% on the spot market, view the broker as your sales department because that's what they are. If you don't have the time to go out and get your own customers, which is not an easy thing to do, but it can be done, they're your sales team. So develop a working, instead of always fighting against them. If you find a broker that is willing to like listen to some of your negotiation, keep that name and call them every time you see a load from that broker. Like if you're on the DAT load board and you see something from, you know, some brokerage, let's just throw out Flip Flop Express, always call the same broker. Even if they don't have that load and it's in a different region, talk to them because they'll usually put you in contact with somebody that they work with in that different region. That's like, hey, I know this person will take care of you, because they'll even email them. This has happened to me. They will email them and say, hey, this is a good guy, you know, like use them. You know what I mean? And you usually get a pretty solid rate.
Right. Yeah. And more to your point earlier, where'd the comment go? Darn, I just had it and totally messed it up. Brian Thomas says that you are right by your earlier point. Cost, tolls, fuels, all you relay that to his point. Yeah, what you were talking about earlier. A lot of times people like you and me, we don't think of these things. We get the tolls, we get the brokers, the lumpers, all these things. If we don't relay these things at the conclusion of these trips, a lot of times these brokers aren't aware of it. They may not know it. You know, some of us may be in a position to absorb maybe a $2 or $3 toll and not really say anything. How does that broker know that kind of stuff? You know, and then that kind of stuff adds up. If you don't communicate that stuff, no wonder you're getting it a couple of months later and, oh, I didn't know about that $50 toll. Nobody told me. They're in an office. They can't see what
you said $2 or $3 toll. I'm thinking, what'd you do? Get on there and get right back off?
Well, I mean, if you
drove your car on it.
Every road, well, every situation is different. There's a couple you can do for a couple of bucks if you're on and off real quick. You know, all the places you can go, and I'm being hypothetical here, but they all add up. If you're, you know, $10 here, $10 there, and you don't care, or maybe your company don't care. If you're at the end, and you're not communicating to the start, it never gets to the next person down the line. So that's why I mentioned that. That's something I used to overlook, and I used to have a problem with. Go ahead,
the only two states that I have traveled to. Now, granted, I don't go out west, right?
Yeah.
I'm an East Coast guy, Midwest to the East Coast. There's only 2 states that I have been in that I can't figure out how to get around certain tolls. That's Delaware, crossing like the Delaware Memorial. So maybe that's New Jersey. Like Leaving New
Yep.
Jersey, I'm always going to pay a toll on a bridge. I have not been
Yep.
able, I'm sure there's some route to go around to not
Yeah, if
pay
you
a
want to
toll
go
or
around
maybe pay lesser.
Fredericksburg through 78 to 83 and come down the back way, you can do it. But
Oh yeah,
that's
you could
like
do that.
2 hours out of your way.
But yeah, for the most part, tolls can be avoided. It's just if you have the time to avoid them, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and it all comes down to choice too. Some guys choose not to do it that way, but that's it.
I'm picking on Delaware today, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of got that. Yeah. All right. So last few things I've got in here. Educate yourself. Stay informed about the market, about brokers, about tactics. Shows like what you're watching right now. If something big were to come up in the news about broker fraud, I'm gonna let you guys know. I'm gonna tell you. So definitely stay in tune with this show and with any future videos I put out, because I'll tell you what, I'm looking for time. It's a hard job to do. I'm not perfect, but I'm looking to crank out more stuff. And the more educated you are, the more you can stay in green instead of in red. There's lots of ways to do it: webinars, workshops, training, all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to go through all that whole list. More to Scott's point earlier, I totally and 100% agree with what you say. Establish partnerships and relationships with people you know and trust. When you know your lane, when you know the broker you're dealing with, when you know what all is going on, which comes with experience. Some of you new guys, I can't really, say anything to relate to, but you focus on building the relationships with the people that you know and trust, you'll eventually learn enough to keep yourself safe, and you don't have to worry about fraud so much. Prioritize those contracts and those repeat customers. You'll not go wrong. Stand firm on negotiation, and this is the big thing. A lot of people do not understand what it means to negotiate. I may have a broker back when I owned my own truck tell me I've got a load, it's going here to there, give me a dollar amount, give me a mileage rate. And okay, they've just told me what they're willing to give it to me for. I turn right around and say, you know what? I'd like to get your load covered, but I'm in it for, and I'll give them a dollar amount, $500 higher. I know damn well they're not going to say yes, but it's a starting point. And I will not be afraid to start higher than what they say and meet in the middle somewhere. Because at the end of the day, I'm getting more than he started with. And along the way, I'm asking important questions to not only learn the load, advantage me, make more money, but also make the trip a lot easier to deal with. So those are tactics a lot of people don't use and don't really think about very often, that will knock them back a few pegs. That's how I used to deal with it. I don't know how you guys currently sitting on this panel feel about OIDA or the other industry associations, but one of the things that was recommended on a research panel I pulled up was joining those. Get somebody to fight on your behalf. I don't know what good that would do in terms of broker fraud, but it's there nonetheless. I'll be nice enough to mention it. Go ahead, Faye.
Just before you play your music,
I'm not
you're responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I don't believe paying a fee to be part of a group. It's kind of like the government in my mind. Yeah. You do what works for you. I wanted to touch on a topic real quick that you brought up earlier when you were talking about getting on load boards.
Yep.
I remember when I started booking all my own freight, and I basically, if I'm on the spot market, I typically will use the DAT load board. It is a little intimidating when they don't put all the information on there and you have to call or email. You know what? Do it a few times. You're gonna make mistakes on a phone call. That you're gonna feel dumb when you hang the phone call up. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes, to where it's just you'd already have like you're 30 seconds, 40 seconds into a phone call and you already know more than what you thought you would know on the load. You know what I mean? And the other thing I
Yeah.
just want to say before I jump off or before you end this is just be responsible for yourself. You know what I mean? I can't preach that enough.
Hmm.
Be responsible
All
for
ve-
yourself, control what you are in control of.
yeah, all very valuable advice. I mean, I fully and 100% agree with everything you just said. It basically highlights everything I just mentioned. I mean, because at the end of the day, I can be a news show all day long and talk crap and opinions about everybody out there. But if I don't offer solutions that make sense, I'm no more of a hypocrite or less of a hypocrite than the other people on YouTube. So that's why I decided to take the tactic of actually offering suggestions and solutions. Um, what would be one of the things, Frank, that you believe would help any of the company drivers out there that currently deal with dispatchers? You think would be sound advice to them when it comes to getting the job done, learning your trade, saving yourself trouble? What do you think would be a good thing for them to know?
I would honestly say that the numbers with pickup numbers and stuff is a plus,